Hello, everyone. It's Meg Bouffier. Welcome. And you know me as the creator of the NIH grant writing courses that you have access to. So welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Expert. And I'm here to answer your questions today. So grab a coffee and let's get started. So for those of you who are new, and I see a couple of new names here today, just a quick reminder that you are in listen only mode, but you have the ability to type in questions in the Q&A box. If you have comments that you would like to share, you can put those in the chat box. Any updates? We have indeed released the new recording of Master the PNU series. So this is a half-day writing course on the multi-project submissions, focusing primarily on center grant applications and the larger format multi-project use like the U54 and similar. So, and as far as what you should be watching right now, we're in late October. So I'm guessing that even the people who are doing resubmissions are beginning to wind down, and the February grantees are starting to crank up their efforts. So you may want to go and look at the preparation portion of the appropriate writing course. So if you're writing in the R series, for example, go and watch part 1 preparation. That would probably be a good place for the February grantees to start. So I am delighted today to introduce Dr. Rebecca Miro, who is going to be talking to us about the new data sharing policy. NIH deemed this important enough that they have done a whole new website on it that's very extensive. A new form set is coming out to accommodate the changes. And there was recently an NIH seminar on this, and Becky attended this seminar and is going to kind of bullet point for us some of the key points. And of course, feel free to start typing in any questions you have, because questions about the data sharing policy will take while she is presenting on that, and other questions we'll just take afterward. So I am going to assign the host duties to Becky so that she can introduce herself. And hold on one second. And talk to us about data sharing. So Becky, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Meg. Okay, let me make sure that this is working. Can you see that okay?
No, we're not seeing
I need to share. Hold on a minute. Oh, let's see. Share. Trying to do it right over here. All right, two. Screen.
There we go. So Becky, before you launch in, do you want to give people just a sense of what you do day to day?
Sure. So a little bit about me. I have at this point probably about 25 years of experience in research administration and some experience in research coordinating. I have made most of my career in higher education and nonprofits, both in the central level of sponsored research as well as departmental. I've been a certified research administrator since 2004, and I have a PhD in higher education administration with a research methods concentration.
Great.
So on that note, what I'm going to present today is really kind of a 10,000-foot view of what the 2 webinars communicated. They are available online, and I went ahead and in the chat I put couple of URLs. One is to the main sharing.nih.gov site. Then I direct linked to the FAQ that is directly related to this new data management and sharing policy, because there are different FAQs on that page, and it's important to get to the right one. And then after the 2 webinars, there were so many questions that NIH issued an NOT that has supplementary information. So in a lot of ways, this is a developing thing, even though they've put the policy out, and they're attempting to address all questions from the users. So basically, let's see if I can, okay, here we go. So this new data management and sharing policy applies to any applications that are going to be submitted on or after January 25th, 2023. The goal of it is basically to make data available more quickly, which then has a number of benefits, which among them, you can accelerate biomedical discovery, you avoid data duplication, it saves NIH money because they're not funding more than one study on essentially it's the same thing if the data is out there. And making the data available more quickly can enable validation of research results and provide data sets that other researchers can then use for future studies. So what kind of data should be shared as part of this plan that will not have to be included in the proposals? They're defining scientific data as data that's commonly accepted in the scientific community as being of sufficient quality to validate and replicate the research findings. So stuff like, and I've outlined them there at the bottom of this slide, things like communications with your colleagues or your lab notebooks, or even preliminary data that's not ready for publication. They don't want that shared. They want good quality data that's being disseminated. And qualitative data may be scientific data if it meets the definition that's in the DMS policy. The mechanisms that will need to include this DMS plan in the applications are any mechanisms that generate scientific data, such as the R, so the R01s, R03s, R21s, and so on. Some of the K awards, the SBIR, STTRs for small business, and the research center grants.
And I'll just pause you there. My guess here is that the Ks that will require it would be the ones like the K01, K07, K08, K22, K23, K99, and probably the ones that are focused on mid-career and further. You know, there's a K designed for somebody further in their career who's working on developing their mentorship skills. Those are not research project Ks. So it's really focused on the main, you know, junior faculty mentored Ks is my guess.
Okay, and so while there's not a prescribed format for the DMS plan, it must contain these 6 elements. And on the sharing website, there's definitions for each of these 6 elements. I didn't want to put it here because it is pretty lengthy, but just know that you can go there and get guidance on what each section should contain. They have also provided a template. You don't have to use that exact layout, but it's just for guidance. And eventually they're going to have a PDF fillable version of that template, but it's not there yet. So where in the application should you put it? Now, I heard 2 different things during the webinar. The first one was someone said that the data and safety monitoring plan would go away. That's usually in your human subjects section. But from what I've been able to see, this screenshot is from a draft of Forms H that's available. It doesn't look like it's going to go away. The new DMS plan is going to go here under other plans, which is part of the research plan section, which is where you put your aims and so forth. The data safety and monitoring plan is still going to be attached in 3.3 of the human subjects and clinical trials information section. You know, you can verify that with Forms H as we get closer to this January 25th requirement date. And then they did mention that if you have a contract, the DMS information would be included as part of the technical evaluation. Excuse me.
H is not out yet, right? I'm just searching it now, but I don't think it's out yet, right?
I don't think the final version's out. I was able to find that draft.
Yeah.
Now, reviewers are not going to see your DMS plan. The people who are going to review the DMS plan is going to be program staff, and they're going to determine if it's appropriate, if they have any questions, if they want you to change anything. And I will touch on this in another slide, but the DMS plan can be revised, not just if the NIH program staff request a change, but also if let's say you're going through the IRB process and something comes up that's of concern to the board, you can go back to the NIH with justification, or if something just doesn't pan out like you had planned, they can be revised. And definitely not set in stone. So one of the big conversations in the webinar and in that supplemental information document that I put in the chat, a lot of the questions had to do with the rights of human subjects. Given that data, presumably de-identified, is what's going to be shared. So what they said was that award recipients have to comply with any guidelines, laws, rules regarding human participants. That's still number one. They encouraged addressing the data management and sharing plan during the consent process. They outlined the researcher should outline steps that they would take for protecting the privacy and the confidentiality of prospective participants. And you have to assess the limitation on subsequent use of data and communicate these limitations to the individuals or entities preserving the data. When and where should the data be shared? So where? In repositories. So for some awards, the NIH mentioned that they could specify a specific repository if they wanted to. On sharing.nih.gov, they have provided links to different repositories that are in existence right now, and I believe all of them were free to put your data in. They did say that you have to select a repository that's appropriate for your data type. So consider that as you make decisions. And data storage fees can be included as direct costs. And that's one of the reasons why it's so important to think about this ahead of time and make the plan, because let's say that you're going to put your data in a repository that actually charges a fee, and you're going to put it there for 10 years, and they're going to charge a fee annually. So for 10 years, well, you can include that in the direct costs of your proposal.
Even beyond so let's say you have a 5-year R01, you can include 10 years worth of costs for the data.
That's what they said in the webinar. The one thing, as research administrator had is, how would you be able to pay that so far in advance?
Right.
And that's what wasn't clear to me yet. Whether the university or the institution could draw down 10 years worth of money and pay annually, or the repository would accept a 10-year payment in advance.
Right. And it may vary by repository.
Right. And then when, and the short answer to this is when to share your data: as soon as possible. No later than the project performance period. But if you're, for whatever reason, going to publish, and that is ahead of the end of your project period, that's when you need to share the data. And if your publication has an EPUB date and a print date, you have to share into the repositories the earlier date, which is your EPUB date. So what I was saying earlier about data sharing related allowable costs, these kind of costs that are outlined on this slide are things that you can include in your direct costs in your budget at proposal time. And these are also available on the sharing website. So no worries if you're trying to write this down. It's all available there to know what's allowable, and there's another list of what's unallowable. But this is what you can put in there. And so as you can see, the last one is preserving the data through established repositories, and that's what I was mentioning earlier. If you're going to have research partnerships, be it consultants, subcontracts, and so forth, you have to make them aware of this DMS policy, and they have to also be in agreement with it. If there are any limitations to what you can share because of other stipulations, that should be included in the plan that is included as part of the proposal submission. I am aware that some of Dr. Bouvier's audience does genomic data sharing. That was addressed during the webinar. The genomic data sharing policy still applies. What they did specify was that if another policy has more detailed expectations than the DMS policy, those expectations have to be followed in addition to the DMS policy. So you have to go by the most, I guess, stringent, if you want to call it that, and then still have your DMS plan included. So just in conclusion, this becomes effective for grants submitted, applications submitted on or after the 25th of January, 2023. So we're like 3 months out from that. You have to include those 6 elements. It's all on sharing.nih.gov, and be sure to plan in advance because of the availability of direct costing some of this into your budget, but also because there are a lot of planning and contingencies and steps to take now between deciding where to put your data, writing that up in the plan, and even your collaborators have to be in agreement.
So Becky, it looks like we have a question about this in the Q&A box. This person is saying, did I understand correctly that we need to share data prior to the end of the project period? What if our publications are not complete?
Whichever one is first. So if your publication is not going to be complete till after the end of your project period, which is typical, I've seen that many times, then you have to share the de-identified data at the end of the project period, because that comes first.
And what if that puts your publications in jeopardy?
That one I'd have to go back and look and see if they address that one.
Yeah, so this is, and I would double check this with the program officer because there's an obvious problem there. You know, and that's how it goes with these policies. Having we've both been around this world for a very long time and seen a lot of policies come on board. And NIH doesn't always do a great job of anticipating the problem from the user perspective, or various problems from the user perspective. So a couple of things that I want to say, just, you know, from my perspective on this, in terms of writing the grant application, err on the side of giving too much information and writing too much in these plans. And like, for our understanding of this at this point is that you have to do it as that separate attachment in Forms H and also in Section 3.3 of the Human Subjects Form. Keep in mind that human subjects non-clinical trial people are only obliged to fill out up to and including Section 3.2. For those folks, Section 3.3 to 3.5 is optional. I always encourage my human subjects researchers who are not doing trials to fill out up to and including 3.5. So at least have a data and safety monitoring plan, even if it's not appropriate to have a DSM board. And then also do this, attach this information in this other section. I'm sure eventually NIH is not going to need you to attach it in 2 places, but for now, that appears to be what they're asking for Forms H. And any questions you have, like the one we were just asked, which is a really good question, like, what if my publications aren't ready until after the project period ends? I'm not ready to release my data yet, particularly if it's not in complete form. It's not in a form where you're ready to upload it somewhere.
I went over to the sharing site, to the FAQ, and there's a question about when should scientific data be shared. Scientific data should be made accessible as soon as possible and no later than the time of an associated publication or the end of the performance period of the extramural award generated by the data that generated the data. Specifically, the DMS policy expects scientific data to be shared by the earlier of 2 time points. And the first time point, the time of an associated publication, or the end of the performance period.
Yeah, so the obvious question here is that you had that bulleted list of, here are the things you should share and here are the versions of data you should not share, right? So like, you know, data that are not fully analyzed, data that are in lab notebooks or part of correspondence, are not ready for prime time in one way or another. What if your performance period ends and the data are not in that form. So I would talk to the program officer about that, because it's an obvious problem, right? Like lots of people are going to be in that category. I would say even potentially most people are going to be in that category, because lots of data analyses occur after the project period ends. So that's an obvious problem. So we have another question. Does this include no cost extension years? My guess is that if you have a no cost extension, that's the end of the project, right?
That's right. Yes.
So you're okay if you're in a no cost extension. Then it would still be whichever comes first, the end of the publication or the end of the no cost extension.
And I'm wondering if some researchers may opt to request that no cost extension to be able to get their publication out first.
Yeah, right. That's a good question. And this is where, like, all of this nuance, this is always the way when there are new policies at NIH. There's always a lot of nuance that hasn't fully been explained or thought through. And this is why there's this growing list of FAQs, this question and answer stuff on the website. So I would keep checking back there. But as always, my preference is ask your program officer. Just ask them, Okay, a couple more questions. Do you have to share all of your data at once? My guess is no.
I don't know that they actually touched on that.
Yeah, my guess is no, because if it's not already at once,
right.
So, but again, this is this level of nuance that I'm not really sure. And I would ask the program officer. How do no cost extensions impact this timeline? We kind of touched on that already, to the best of our knowledge, is that, that would be the end of the new end of the project period. So, and then another question, how many years of no cost extension can you get now to avoid getting stolen from before you get a chance to publish your work? This is the main question, right? I just don't get how they can say.
And that this thing that I was reading a few minutes ago, the earlier of the two time points, and when the second bullet is the end of the performance period, and it says scientific data underlying findings not disseminated through peer-reviewed journal articles should be shared by the end of the performance period unless the grant enters into a no-cost extension.
Yeah, so again, I would ask the program officer, are you guys going to be a little more generous about giving no-cost extensions, given that our findings could be in jeopardy if we're forced to release them before we publish? That's the obvious problem with this. That is the $1 million question here, as far as I see it. And, luckily it's not a problem today or tomorrow, right? Because this is going to apply. The soonest it is going to apply is like in 2 years. No, further out than that, because let's say you apply for a 2-year award with a mid-February deadline, so it would be 2 years from the start date. So you have some time to work this out with your program officer, and NIH has time to figure out how to protect the grantee. I get that NIH's main concern is release the data as soon as possible, but they have to understand that grantees have to protect their publications, so there's got to be some give and take there, and they're going to have to issue some clearer guidance about what they're going to allow, so that grantees are not getting screwed in this. So, okay, other questions about that? I know we took up a lot of time on that, but this is like an entire new form set is going to be built around this data sharing policy. So it's not trivial. And the expectations are still, some of them are still a little murky, particularly this one that we've been discussing. So there's going to have to be some clarity from NIH on that issue. To wrap up this discussion, as Becky said, she attended this seminar that NIH gave, and it was recorded and is available through the NIH website. So you can go and watch the whole thing if you want. There's also this website that is pretty extensive and growing as NIH post the Q&As from grantees, and feel free to post your question there about this very issue. Are they going to be more generous with no cost extensions so that grantees can protect their data before they're published? If you're interested in Becky's summary, of course, these sessions are recorded and you can always go watch them in our YouTube videos, which are time-stamped, and you can, go to the questions that you have and just watch from there. So do people have other questions about this, or Becky, do you have any other comments about data and data sharing?
Not directly. I'm kind of wondering if they would allow someone to, in their data management plan, include a limitation of I won't share my data until my publication is out, regardless. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't see them allowing that language because they've been so clear that it has to be, whichever comes sooner, the publications or the end of the project period. So it sounds to me like your only option is the no cost extension. So the real question is, how generous are you going to be with no cost extensions? If the only reason I need one is to finalize my data. So here's another question. For awards given to multiple researchers with different institutions, would the expectation be that one single DMS plan be submitted, or perhaps multiple plans per institution? I have a guess here, but Becky, do you?
That wasn't discussed, and I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere. I would suspect if you're submitting an application from each institution, each one should have a DMS plan. I mean, even if they were identical, but.
So here's my guess on this. And again, ask the program officer, but it's a single application from multiple institutions. So my guess is it's a
single application on DMS plan. I was thinking of 2 applications being submitted, one from each institution.
No, I think this person means a single application where like maybe you have a primary site and a subcontract at one or more sites. My guess is it's a single DMS plan, and you would probably default to the most inclusive language. You'd probably have to look at DMS plans for each organization if they have anything specific about their DMS plans, and default to the most inclusive language on each aspect of the DMS plan, and then make kind of a hybrid that would work for all of the organizations and NIH. It's a pain in the butt, but I do understand why, it's been coming for a while, this plan, which is part of the reason why I always encourage even my non-clinical trial folks to fill out the section 3.3 of the human subjects form, so that they're reporting a plan. And if you're on the fence about whether or not you need a data and safety monitoring board, I always say err on the side of caution and propose the board. I've never seen reviewers say, gee, you're being too cautious, or you really don't need a board, or you really don't need a plan. But I've seen many reviewers say, you're not being cautious enough. Like you really needed a board, a DSM board. So anyway, I think the take-home message for me is there's a lot of gray area here, and you should probably check with your program officer before you draw too many conclusions about what you're allowed to do, and always err on the side of giving too much information and being too cautious whenever you can, whenever it's feasible. So we are actually at time. Do people have any other questions? You're welcome to email them to us. If you did not get any questions answered, just send them to meg@megbouvier.com. And I want to thank Becky for attending this seminar, because I was not able to do it because it was in the middle of deadlines. So I really appreciated having this summary information about this important change that's coming down the pike for all of us. So thank you, Becky, for joining us today and sharing your thoughts, and thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for having me on, Meg.
Bye-bye.